Until recently, I bought all of my food from a supermarket. It wasn't until I went to a farmer's market and started asking the farmers there some questions that I realized I didn't know much about the food that I was eating. I was recently introduced to some lamb farmers, so I thought it would be a good idea to go to their farm and ask them some questions. Here's how it went. James and Jono, thank you for having me at your farm. For our audience, we're here in the shearing shed.
Yeah, in the wolf shed.
Do you actually do, in the wool shed, do you do shearing?
No. We've got shedding sheep, so it's podcasting studio.
I see. So first thing I wanted to talk about is the two of you are involved in lamb farming.
Mm-hmm.
I've recently purchased some of your lamb. It was fantastic. My family all enjoyed it.
Good to hear.
So what got you both into lamb farming?
Do you reckon we can say lamb farming?
No,
Or we should go back to the start, really?
you should start at the start. Yeah.
Well, we both got into farming back in 2020. In 2020, my wife and I were traveling overseas, and then COVID hit, and we were in South Africa at the time, and we had to get a repatriation flight back home. And I'm a high school teacher normally, but I'd taken that year off. So I arrived home in April or May. Our trip was cut short, and then I had the rest of the year to kill, basically. And we reconnected with James and Ali, and James had access to some land at the time, and it sort of began at that point. Like, I had time to kill. He was going out to a block of land, and there was a farmer out there that we were getting to know, or James was certainly getting to know, and everything was locked down as well. And in some ways we needed something to do, but I guess we had a bit of a common interest in agriculture to an extent. And yeah, when you've got free time and you've got and you need something to do,
Yeah.
that's sort of where it sprung from.
Well, we already had a few steers out there
Yeah.
at that point.
Well, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
We got the 5 steers.
5
you mean?
steers, yeah.
Explain for the audience what a steer is.
Haha.
Treat me like I'm 5.
Well, a steer is a bullock, Tim.
Okay. a male
No, it's
sheep.
the male equivalent of a cow. So it's a bovine, let's say, that's been castrated. So it's a castrated male cow. Cows are the female.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we had to get our heads around all these terms as well. But we didn't start with sheep at all. And in fact, I personally haven't gotten involved in sheep. That's more of James's domain now. But we both started the farming adventure with cattle. So yeah, as James said, 5 steers, and we got really into something called regenerative agriculture. I don't know if you've heard of that. Yeah, where the idea is to sort of build soil and improve soil quality. And the idea was to rotate your livestock across small cells and with temporary fencing. And so we were out there. There was a point where we were out there every second day moving cattle. As in picking up our fencing, installing it, 50 meters down the paddock, and so that the cattle have another space of fresh feed to eat. And the idea is that you rest the land that they've just been on, and they've manured everywhere and hopefully fertilized that ground. And then you keep track of the growth that you get back in that resting period. So that's what we were really excited by in the 2020 year, I would say.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And how did you get from this first venture into selling lamb? Well, how did you grow into Tekoa Farms?
Yeah.
And the arrangement that you have now?
Well, everything sort of grew. Everything grew rather quickly, and not even grew, sort of morphed and changed is probably a better way to put it. Like, there's a lot of I feel like the growth is really occurring now, but there's been a lot of morphing and changing along the journey. So we, after a couple of years of doing, well, it was probably only...
It was only like just
it wasn't
over a
long.
year.
Yeah, it wasn't that long. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then an opportunity came up to lease this farm. and it's about 700 acres that we lease here, and it's just an incredible opportunity, really. And I used to be a carpenter by trade, and I was looking to have a change. I was very interested in agriculture and asking all sorts of questions, and making friends and that were farmers and different things. And an opportunity came up to lease this place, and we just said yes. And it was set up for sheep, so let's get some sheep. So it's almost 3 years ago. What's today's date?
The 9th of April, I
The
think.
9th.
Correct, yeah.
So this place, the gentleman we leased it off, it settled 3 years ago yesterday, and we had about 500 head of sheep here on the 11th. So it'll be 3 years on the 11th of April. But I didn't know what a sheep was prior to that, so it was very much the deep end. Yeah.
Okay, so you've leased the land, got some sheep. What do you do next?
Try and keep them alive.
Is that difficult?
For sheep it can be. Keeping them alive, keeping them in is difficult, particularly with our sort of sheep.
Good fences counts for a lot.
Yeah, we're working on that. We were fencing this morning.
Right.
But there's no end to fences, so you can fence for days out here.
With 100 acres, I'm sure you've got plenty of work to do.
A lot of work.
That's a lot of land.
It is a lot of land. But so sheep. I don't know. And then the first 12 months of that, it's just it's the deep end. So you're not swimming. It's treading water. It's it's quite a process, really.
But we brought cattle. The cattle that we had at the first farm, we brought them across as well. So we kind of halved the land up.
Yeah, we got a few extras. We got heifers that first year that we had out here.
Yep. And then we, so essentially James and I together were leasing the back half of this property, and we're running cattle on that half of the property, while James was running the sheep on this half of the property.
Well, that was only last year.
Oh, was it? So
Yeah.
the 1 year that we did that for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the first year we had heifers out here for like 6 months, and we sold them to Frank.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
right.
we didn't have cattle out here until January
True.
23.
True. It's sort of coming back to me now.
Yeah.
We had 2 herds there for a
Yeah.
little while.
Two
One-
herds, 2 different breeds.
Yeah. And the
Yeah.
properties are miles away from each other. There's a lot of driving at that point in time.
So we're out here in Rokewood. Where was the other property?
In a suburb called Wollert.
Pretty much Craigieburn.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's a distance.
Yeah. From here it certainly is.
Yeah, it's a couple of hours, but
But I mean, at the time as well, like I was still living. Well, was I? I was in Melbourne initially when we were in Wollert, and so was James. And so moving out here, I'm trying to think.
it's not like natural growth in a sense that you have a goal in mind and it just sort of progresses. It's really morphing, changing, opportunities open up, so you change direction. Like you're walking through open doors, and you just give everything a proper go and see where it ends up. So it is sort of hard, and a lot's happened in the last, say, 3.5 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
So where did the idea for Tekoa Farms come from?
Like the idea of the business itself. That was something that we.
It was always there as an idea, selling the meat.
Yeah.
Like we were, veggie gardens and fruit trees and all that sort of stuff. And eating good tucker and getting organic veg and all that sort of stuff. And finding meat it seemed to be the hard one. And we found a really good butcher, Frank. He's an absolute legend. But so he's got great stuff. And I suppose the connection with him sort of fueled part of the
that was a big
vision.
deal. So this butcher Frank, we actually went out to his place, and he's got a great story himself of regenerating his own farm, and so I think seeing his farm that day was very inspirational. And then he's all about selling high quality, ethically raised meat kind of thing, and I think that was a big deal for us.
Yeah,
To
he's a
see
big
that.
part of the story, I think, Frank.
Mm.
And even the people we leased the farm off, the first sort of coming here, there was sort of selling boxed lamb was a conversation at the time. And then it just sort of, well, it's a lot of work to get that started. And there's just so much going on, learning how to farm sheep, and just a very full few years, really. And partway through last year, it was sort of like, had lambs that were ready for the market. We've got this idea that we've talked so much about. What's stopping us? Can we make a start? You know. Yeah.
I think at the time when we got into farming as well, because we'd come from the city, and like farming was so novel to us, and you discover how separated you are from your food. Well, that's how I'd probably describe it. In my experience, and so it was really enjoyable to sort of have a sense of where your food's coming from, and I guess we're right.
It just feels right.
It just feels right.
Feels right
to be connected to your food. And so we've written this up on the website and everything, but we love the idea of connecting people to their food and where it's come from, people who've produced it, all that kind of thing. So I think that was a big sort of missional aspect to it.
It's sort of our own curiosity.
Yeah,
is just sort of. I feel like that fuels the business, and it also, it changes with it changes with us. Like it's sort of.
And we're getting that. I mean, it is interesting. We haven't been operating for very long, but it is really fascinating. The people, like the comments that you do get from people, people love being connected to the farm. They love being connected to the farmer. Like I know in your case, I didn't actually get to meet you the day that I dropped the meat off, but often I like to meet the customer when I drop it off, because I want them to have
I actually
that
thought about
connection.
coming back from work to meet you too, because I like
really?
the idea of buying meat off someone and actually meeting the person who made my food.
Yeah, exactly, that kind of thing. So, we've had some nice experiences through those connections. So, it's been good.
Yeah, my wife and I found very quickly when we started to go organic and local that finding good quality meat for a reasonable price was incredibly difficult. Really difficult. Finding organic meat in general, not too bad if you're happy to pay exorbitant prices. We're talking 3-4 times supermarket price. But speaking of organic meat and not getting it from the supermarket, what makes your lamb and other lamb like yours or other meat like yours different from supermarket meats? So what's the big incentive for not going to the supermarket?
One of the big, probably, that direct connection to the farmer. Like it's a relational aspect. You can learn a bit about how it's been farmed, what's involved. You can get to know us a little bit. Like it shortens the distance from where the food's produced to where it's been eaten. And I think with the supermarkets, it's just sort of ambiguous. Did your chops come from New South Wales? Did they come from 40 minutes away?
They come from Western
Tassie?
Australia.
They come from
They come from
were
overseas.
were they in cold storage for 6 months? Were they slaughtered last Tuesday? You don't know anything about it, and a lot of the let's say a lot of the quality is preserved in the process, like how long it's been hung for before it's butchered, like between slaughtering and being butchered. Like if it's hung for a very short amount of time, there's a lot of excess moisture in the meat, and so when you cook your food up, like your cuts will shrink, and they, I'm sure you've experienced it. They don't sit properly in the pan, and they cook uneven, and they shrink around the bone. Like
the shrinkage is one of the major comments we've gotten from customers that they haven't experienced that with our meat, because it usually hangs for a bit longer than what you'd find from cuts in the supermarket.
How long do you hang for?
They sort of hang from about, let's say, about 5 days before they're sort of cryovac. Yeah, maybe 6 days sometimes.
Sometimes 7, isn't it? Maybe not quite 7.
That would be very rare, I would think, yeah.
5 or 6.
Yeah, like lambs went to the abattoir yesterday. They get slaughtered today, and they'll get butchered on Monday. So that from today, they'll be hanging right now, and they'll get butchered on Monday. So that's about 6 days.
And then delivered to customers' doors
on the Thursday and the Friday.
Next week.
Yeah.
So from live stock to on your plate as the customer, It's about 2 weeks,
Yeah, just under.
Just under,
Yeah.
yeah.
just under.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's quite a long time if you.
That's about as fresh as you're going to get it, isn't
yeah.
it?
Yeah.
Well, it's a long time from that moisture, like getting that moisture out, as opposed to being slaughtered today and packaged tomorrow, and then you buy it in the supermarket, next week or something, and then you cook it, and because once it's packaged, there's no moisture leaving that meat anymore, and so there's there's a fine line between hanging too long and hanging for just the right amount of time, but you start going longer and you can extend it, quite a long way with sort of dry aging and things like that. But we're a few years off getting into that realm, I think.
Yeah.
But that's cool. Tastes good.
Mm.
Flavour only improves.
Another aspect is potentially the breed of sheep that we have. I don't know heaps and heaps about the Aussie whites, but they are a bit unusual. Would that be correct?
Yeah, there's meant to be a lower melting point on the fat. So we talk about intermuscular fat, or IMF, so it's or probably more commonly known as marbling. So you've got your fat on the outside, and then you've got your typical sort of deposits of fat in various cuts. But through the sort of grain of the meat, there'll be sort of little lines of fat. And the Aussie whites, it seems as though the fat melts at a lower temperature, and in some of the good rams that they test, it's as low as 37 degrees. So this is the sort of definition of melt in your mouth,
That's pretty low.
That is very low, yeah. But the marbling, that's where the flavour is. So if you have sort of fine marbling through a lamb cutlet or something, that's when it's on point, succulent, lovely. So that's what we're aiming for, And so now sort of sire selection and things like that, we'll be looking for those sorts of things. And I mean, from my perspective, growing the lamb, it's like a direct feedback. We're getting it chopped up, people are eating it, you're hearing whether they like it or not, you're hearing what they like about it as well. So it's sort of no point growing anything, really. I don't really care what it is, if it was cotton or mangoes, or if you're not talking to the people that are using what you produce, how do you know what to aim for? So I think Tekoa really, it's sort of advantageous from the farmer to be able to have a gauge on that, like it's finger on the pulse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you got to wonder, if they're not talking to the customer, what's their priority? Is it quality of the product, or is it the amount of profit that they're making?
You're talking about farmers here. The profit margins are like next to nothing.
I'm talking about other farmers.
Yeah.
I know a little bit about the price gouging that Coles and Woolies do on farmers, but that's probably a topic for another day.
Yeah,
you guys don't sell to Coles and Woolies, do you? Only direct to customer.
No, not only direct to customer.
Oh, no, okay.
No, we go to the market as well. We don't have enough customers, Tim. But
Oh, you mean in the sense that they go to the market where I suppose Coles could potentially pick them up.
Yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
but we don't sell directly to them, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I hope they're paying dearly for them. I hope they're fighting for them over the pens.
So you talked about quality of the product, and intermuscular fat. What actually goes into the farming practice that affects the outcome of the meat? Because that's a question that I've had. I've looked into primarily beef, if I'm honest. I'm actually just trying to find farmers selling direct to the public with high quality meat was pretty difficult in general. I'm sure there's plenty out there, but in terms of finding them, I've found quite challenging. And they all talk about, what a good product looks like, but what goes into creating that kind of product?
Yeah. Well, I think we're not organic. We don't have any fancy labels really. Like we're just trying to do a good job, really. And there's a lot of variables that factor into that, sort of the health of the landscape, health of the livestock. Obviously you want to be efficient, and you need to be efficient, and you need to be producing. So in terms of our practice, I don't know if you could give it it doesn't have an easy name, but it's not too dissimilar to what everyone does though. I think in Australia, the farmers are good. Farmers do a great job. So we're really trying to learn a lot, sort of what's traditionally been done. We're also looking, particularly with the genetics, I'd say we're sort of looking to what could be done in the future and what sort of possibilities are out there, because the sort of our sheep have really high fertility, and they've sort of got a higher fertility than traditionally was available in sheep. So for us, sort of building up a herd of quality genetics, it's like there's a moment in time right now where it can really be done in a way that it hasn't been able to be done before. So, I mean, embracing the traditions of what makes it work and also looking forward to what could be done is quite exciting. But you might have more specifics. I don't know if that's too philosophical
I was thinking, like, if you, I don't know how much control there is in the end product. For instance, if you wanted to get a leaner piece of meat versus a more fatty, cut of meat out of the end product.
Yeah.
Are there elements that you can change? Are there, things in the feed or in the paddocks or the way you manage the sheep that alter the outcome of the product at the end?
Yeah. So at the moment, like the sheep just grazing a pasture, standard pasture paddock. It's pretty poor pasture, in all honesty, at the moment. We sort of just come out of a pretty dry spell. We've just sort of received the autumn break. So the pastures are pretty hungry, let's say. Like, they're not providing a whole heap. But then we have so our process at the moment for Tekoa is we draft out the lambs that are close in weight, about a month out, and then they go into a loosened pasture, which is it's a deeper rooted plant. It's high value, feed value for sheep, certainly. And they go into that for the last month. This last month we had to provide sort of lupins through what's called a lick feeder. So lupins they're a pulse. So they're sort of like a chickpea or a bean or a lentil. Like, they're a really small, high protein, something like 14% crude protein. Not a lot of energy in them, I don't believe. But so we just put that out in the paddock in a lick feeder, so the sheep can come, and it's sort of adjusted so they should be able to get about 100 grams a day if they're that way inclined. And we put that out at the moment just because there's not much value in the pastures, and we need to have a steady line of lambs coming through. Otherwise, the weights and our cuts will differentiate. The sort of level of fat that we'll have will change. And then after that, so they do a month with that, and then we weigh them all, and we select the weight range for Tekoa off live weight, and then we bring them back to the wool shed, and then we condition score them or fat score them, so sort of feeling over the short ribs to sort of work out who's got the right amount of cover and who doesn't. And then, it's like the short list, and then we take the best for Tekoa, and we send everything else to the sale yards. Yeah, I don't know if that helps you.
Yeah.
I suppose the selection is probably where a lot of it's happening, because, we had 80 lambs in here the other day, and we pulled out 20 for Tekoa. They suit the criteria. They're all within 2 kilograms of each other. It's because you need that consistency. Otherwise, like, we're not selling our cuts sort of per kilo per se. So there's half a lamb in a box or a quarter of a lamb in a box. So we need that quarter or that half to be as close to the next box as possible. So that's probably a constraint of our current business model, but it seems pretty easy to service at the moment.
How long roughly does it take to raise a lamb until it's ready to harvest?
Well, the first year took us 14 months. They were nearly not lambs anymore. They were nearly hoggets. So the first year, 14 months. I don't know if he's good at counting, but that's longer than a year, which is terrible. That's a mixture of genetics, and we were just learning, and there's a lot to learn. And now we're sort of getting to about 7 months, 8 months maybe, where we're getting up to a 52, 54 kilos for the Tekoa weights. But like, we had a lamb go in yesterday. I'm pointing over there because they were in the pens, but it was 67 kilos.
Wow,
it's huge. And we had 10 weeks there with no rain, and it was the driest, according to one of the neighbours, and I trust him. It was the driest spell here since 1962, and this lamb that 67 kilos.
Is that partly to do with the lupins as well?
No, I'd only had lupins for the last 3 weeks.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah, fair enough.
it sort of takes a couple of weeks for their rumens to adjust to it. But one of the benefits of putting lupins out, the way I understand it at the moment, is that because you've got this sort of protein and fibre that's not sort of present in the grass, they can sort of gain more nutrients from the grass. So even like up to 10% more out of the grass is what they'll get if you just have a little bit of grain or a little bit of lupins out there. Yeah, just sort of, I suppose, a more diverse diet, their bodies are just functioning better and they are able to absorb more from the pasture. So,
and presumably put on a bit more weight then.
yeah, I figure if you're growing, that's a good sign that you're doing well. But having said that, I think you can feed them too much wheat and barley, like things that really high carbohydrate content. I think if you're growing them very swiftly on that, I think we'd run the risk with our sheep of putting in too much fat and not enough meat. So I think the lupins, it's more protein than carbohydrate, so it's gonna translate to more meat than fat, I think. And certainly at the rates we're doing it, it's pretty moderate.
From a grass-fed versus grain-fed perspective, the lupins count as a grain, or are they more of a...
No, lupins aren't a grain. Lupins are a pulse, so they're a legume. They're a
legume.
Yeah, so they're not a grain per se.
Do you have any opinions on grass-fed versus
do.
grain-fed?
I do.
Please.
I think grass-fed meat is, we have to say grass-fed beef, let's say. I think the sort of studies are pretty clear on it that it's got high counts of omega-3 in the fat as opposed to omega-6. I don't think that turns it into like a salmon or a trout or something. But the omega-3s are better for the human body, I believe, than the omega-6s. So having a balance that's skewed more towards omega-3, that's a good thing, I think, from a health perspective. The grain is an interesting categorization because grains are just annual grasses. So, like, don't want grain fed. It's like, you realise when they're in the paddock eating this stuff,
they're eating grains.
They're eating grains as part of their diet, but it's not what we associate. I think what people, when they say grain fed, they're thinking like feedlot ration of however many kilos of, basically it's that carbohydrate to get them to flesh out quickly.
Picture in my mind is like the cattle or the sheep all in a line with a giant trough that's been filled with what I'm assuming is just post-processed grain. It's not grass. It's not on the stalk. They're not out in the field. They're being brought in to feed, and then they're being sent back out.
Yeah.
That's actually better than the picture that you'll find on a lot of YouTube channels, or if you Google it or something like that, of feedlots.
Yeah, I think they get a hard rap, the feedlots. You got to...
Well, some of them probably deserve a hard rap, but it's possible that generally speaking, they don't deserve as hard a rap as they get given.
Yeah, there's a lot of people to feed, Tim. It's sort of your pastures in Australia, in this part of the world, like in spring, the pastures were great for about a week. Then it stopped raining and then didn't start again until December. So we sort of had a second burst of spring in the beginning of summer, which is unusual. But you can't turn off consistent quality year round when your pastures are only productive for 6 weeks of the year.
Yeah.
So... you can, the feedlot scenario, you can sort of get a more accurate picture of sort of how much meat you're producing and things like that when the season's working against you. So there's practical reasons for it. But from a health perspective, I think if you can go grass-fed, then it's probably better. I think it tastes better, grass-fed.
Well, certainly what cows are designed to eat.
Yeah. Yeah, it's what they're designed to eat, but it's not, they grow awfully well on grain.